Greetings. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. I'm Lexi Eve, and welcome back to the second intro Magick Without Tears video. Today, we're going over together letter B from the introduction. Let's begin. So right off, we're going to jump into letter B from the introduction of Magick Without Tears. Quote, April 20th, 1943, Cara Sora, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. I was very glad to have your letter, and am very sorry to hear that you have been in affliction. About the delay, however, I think I ought to tell you that the original rule of the Order of AA was that the introducer read over a short lection to the applicant, then left him alone for a quarter of an hour, and on coming back received a yes or no. If there was any hesitation about it, the applicant was barred for life. End quote. As this letter will continue in a moment, that rule has been laxed. When a student passes examination, and on the day that they're received as a probationer, basically they meet their teacher, they are read their oath and tasks, and then Liber 61, the preliminary lection, is read to them. They are then left alone for a period of time to reflect and think everything over. So, Crowley had said initially, upon coming back from that being left alone period, if they hesitated even a little, they were supposed to be barred. And AA is an order where if you're kicked out, you're out for life. That's just how it goes. So being barred for life on that hesitation, that's been laxed. You're, according to Crowley, allowed to hesitate. It's a big step into the great work, and personally, I think you should think about that. You should have already determined that you want to do it by the time you're getting to this point of it, but I agree that that should be somewhat lax. It should be a very solemn moment and one of reflection. I myself underwent being received as a probationer, and I'll just recount it quickly. It was a weird experience. Actually, a mistake occurred on the part of my would-be teacher. He's a well-known bishop from a certain lodge from a certain order in New York City. We agreed to meet on a specific date at Washington Square Park. So I went there at that time, and I ended up waiting for about an hour or so before finally giving up, thinking, well, maybe something bad happened. And I emailed him saying, hey, I'm here at the time and place, and it seems you're not here. I don't know what happened, but yeah, I hope you could contact me. So I thought maybe I didn't make the cut last minute or something, you know. Apparently he forgot. He got the dates mixed up. He apologized and said come tomorrow at the same time and place. So I came back the next day. He came, read my oaths, tasks, and Liber 61, and then left me alone for a while. I did what he instructed. I reflected on the tasks and the oath, and what I had heard in 61, Liber 61, which I had read many times myself. Though I couldn't quite shake the thought, what if he left and didn't show back up like the day before? It's kind of a funny thought. Well, he did, and he asked, do you want to go through with this? I replied yes and signed. I don't recall having had any hesitation, but I signed, and yeah, we proceeded from there. Liber 61, the preliminary lection, is an awesome text. It's quite reminiscent of Clouds Upon the Sanctuary. It describes the purpose of the Order of AA, and it goes into personal aspects of one's path while you're going through the AA system. Especially important is the quote from it. Should therefore the candidate hear the name of any god, let him not rashly assume that it refers to any known god, save only the God known to himself. End quote. It's a very Gnostic, personal ideology. Whatever it is to you, it is to you. Nobody should be telling you what it is. You could ask for other people's opinions and then mull that over, but no Thelemite should ever tell you this is what you should believe and this is how you should believe it. So I share this quote to you to say, Thelema is your path. No one can tell you exactly what you need to do or how you should interpret anything. Though having a superior can help in many other ways, such as through sharing their experience of discovery, as well as pointing out mistakes that you're making. Also, people like me give these lectures, whether in person or now via technology. Lectures help. It gives you knowledge you may not have had. It gives you people's experiences that you can't have because my experiences are my own, and maybe something I share that's personal might help you in your process. But your interpretation of God is your own interpretation, or whatever that is that you like to call it. God is just lack of a better word. The light, the divine, the source of creation, the universe, whatever the heck it is to you that you feel comfortable calling it. To continue with letter B, quote, "The reason for the relaxation of the rule of hesitation to sign in was that it was thought better to help people along in the early stages of the work, even if there was no hope of their turning out first class. But I should like you to realize that sooner or later, whether in this incarnation or another, it is put up to you to show perfect courage in the face of the completely unknown and the power of rapid and irrevocable decision without counting the costs." End quote. A couple of things here. I'll address this because it's the quickest, and then I'll stick to the script after. You need to know what your will is on the thelemic path. And you're going to be confronted in life with this in situations where you have to make decisions on the fly. So knowing your will, let's say in joining this order, AA for instance, and let's say that rule was there so that if you hesitated even a little, you're barred from the order. I don't agree that that's a good way to train somebody, but I get the idea that he might have been playing around with, is that you need to know what your will is. And if it was to join the order, you should be doing that, regardless of anything internal or external. You should be saying, that's my will and I need to do this, so there's no hesitation. I think that's the lesson trying to be conveyed, only you can't convey that lesson if there's an irrevocable consequence as a result of that, especially when you don't know that it's going to happen. Granted, you're going to be in situations in life where you make a decision and you don't know what the outcome's going to be. So that's a valid symbol of things that happen in life. Sometimes we make decisions and the outcome of them can be catastrophic to ourselves or others. So you have to be aware of what you're doing at all given times, know your will and do that. Even do your will if you know the result is going to be catastrophic strictly because you have to do your will. Do it regardless, but that's the point of thelema in my view, only my view. Take that or leave it. To continue with the script here, so the other things on this quote is that a lot of people fail in the AA process. Most people, and especially in Crowley's day, were not making it past the grade of neophyte. The common reasons for this is because there's a lot more work in the process of AA than people realize. So there's a lot more reading and practicing than people realize when they first join. And also, the work that you have to do is extremely difficult, and people don't realize how difficult it is. Usually they become not only overwhelmed, but while performing the great work, internal issues arise, and they have to face and overcome these issues. For the majority of the people who end up not completing the AA system, either leaving or getting kicked out, it's just because they're not willing to look at themselves. What happens is they see that either their teacher has pointed to something that's uncomfortable inside of them, or the work that they're doing has exposed that thing in their character that they've been set in their ways of doing. And rather than uproot the malady and remove it from themselves, they either flee or become hostile and resistant to change. They either get kicked out because not doing the work, or getting too aggressive with the teacher because something's coming up that they don't want to change that's bad inside of them that blocks them from doing their will, or they just run away. It's usually one or the other. Now, on the problem of these that AA can be helped, and that's the amount of work that AA requires of its aspirants, there's people like Phyllis Seckler, who helped start the Temple of Thelema and Temple of the Silver Star in service to AA, both of which train candidates through Golden Dawn style initiation in a way that is much more beneficial for those who wish to take up the work of AA later on. Now, I'm not a member of either of these groups, though if you're interested, links to both of them, the Temple of Thelema and Temple of the Silver Star, both links are in the description below, and you could read about those. I think they have description pages. Now, also on the above quote, if we look at One Star in Sight, written by Crowley for those who wish to join the AA, it states the purpose of the Lima and initiation in AA, quote, each member must make it their main work to discover for themselves their own true will, and to do it, and do nothing else, end quote. And there's a footnote number 6 attached to this line, and the footnote states, quote, it is not considered essential to right conduct to be an active propagandist of the law and so on. It may or may not be the true will of any particular person to do so. But since the fundamental purpose of the order is to further the attainments of humanity, membership implies, by definition, the will to help mankind by the means best adapted thereto, end quote. It's one thing that my teacher in our order impressed upon me about our work, and that is that the great work should always lead to some kind of service for the betterment of mankind. Mind you, the work I did was not in AA. I'm not going to go into what happened with me and the outer college lineage. I'm not doing that on this channel. I did my work in a group out in Oregon. I was in New York, and I had a teacher in a separate order that had nothing to do with the Lemic orders. My teacher was William Allen Wheeler. He passed on in 2016, and the work we did was not AA. So when I say my teacher, I'm always referring to William Allen Wheeler unless I say otherwise. And that's what I'm saying above here, is that the work I did with him, he impressed upon me. You do your work, and then you help other people after you've changed yourself and you're doing your will. You help other people to do their will when that opportunity arises, if that opportunity arises. Otherwise, find other ways to do service. He was a very service-oriented person, and he definitely appreciated that I was also, and he definitely helped impress that upon me. So, just wanted to clarify. Now, to continue with letter B. Crowley writes next the idea that women naturally have intuition. I argue somewhat against this notion, right? While intuition by Hermetic Kabbalah corresponds with the feminine sphere Bina via the Neshama, the intuitive part of the soul, thus the mother, this trait of intuition is not innate in women alone, nor do all women have intuition naturally. I know plenty of men who have worked on what we call symbolically the feminine parts of self, and I know plenty of women who have no spiritual qualities nor intuitive abilities whatsoever. As long as we understand that both sexes of our species are capable of all the same things spiritually, and that these qualities that we call spiritual feminine and masculine are but symbolic of what we also call the negative and positive, active and passive aspects of nature, then there's no trouble. We understand everything. But if we're mistakenly taking at face value the terms feminine and masculine and applying them to the man and woman of our species, and we keep drilling our species in such binary fashions instead of androgynous fashions, meaning and whatever your gender or your sex is, you can have both feminine and masculine spiritual traits. If you misunderstand that, then you're looking for trouble. So I just understand in spirituality, occultism, when you hear feminine and masculine, especially in terms of the tree of life, it's referring to active and passive, which no matter what your gender is, you have active and passive within you, right? So understand that. Next in the letter, Crowley points to a flaw in Mackie that he notes needs adjustment. Quote, your state of mind suggests to me that you must have been, in the past, under the influence of people who were always talking about things and never doing any real work. They kept on arguing all sorts of obscure philosophical points. That is all very well, but when you have succeeded in analyzing your reactions, you will understand that all this talk is just an excuse for not doing any serious work. End quote. Like I said, this is the role of a teacher. And it's refreshing to see Crowley write as a teacher. One of the only other places where something like this is published is a Master of the Temple, where Crowley writes notes upon the magical record of Frater Achad. So here, Crowley is pointing out flaws in the student that need adjustment. Whether it was this or previous incarnation, it seems Mackie has become conditioned to avoid confrontation, or else talks about problems, but takes no action to change anything. Now, for the sake of this conversation, I think that's something many of us can relate to. Now, if not ourselves, probably families or peers, friends, especially if they're not spiritually inclined. I mean, how often do many people either sweep their problems under the rug or talk about them, but in such a way that they hope the problems resolve themselves without any action, or talk about it in a way where they know they have no desire to actually change anything, Crowley continues, quote, "I am confirmed in this judgment by your saying, I don't know if I want to enter into a great conflict. I need peace. Fortunately, you save yourself by adding, real peace, that is living and not stagnant. Now, all life is conflict. Every breath that you draw represents a victory in the struggle of the whole universe. You can't have peace without perfect mastery of circumstance. And I take it that this is what you mean by living not stagnant." End quote. In Liber it says, quote, "As brothers fight ye," end quote. First and foremost, for Thelemites, the war we face is one internal inside of our own being. Yet, sometimes we must stand firm and face conflict directly. For example, if a tyrant demands we be subservient to them and actively tries to deny our liberties and to accept their demands, even if it means persecution, we should oppose tyranny directly. But otherwise, sometimes usually sidestepping BS can work just fine. If something does not directly affect oneself, and if it does not stop you from doing your will, it's usually best to mind your own business. Good rule of thumb. But in cases where someone is bringing that BS to your front door, you should accept the problem for what it is and take action to correct it. I am hesitant to give any examples, as such things are not only personal, but delicacy should be implemented, and these type of situations require grace and finesse to handle properly. Always use your best judgment in such matters, taking into account what your will is in any given situation. Side note, what Crowley is also talking about in the above quote is dealing with circumstances where you're involved in something that brings out certain things that need to be changed. And that could be inside of yourself, that could be in your social setting, people close to you. We'll get more into that in a second. Letter B continues, quote, "But it is of the first consequence for you to summon up the resolution to stamp on this sea of swirling thoughts by an act of will. You must say, 'Peace, be still.' The moment you have understood these thoughts for what they are, tools of the enemy, invented by him with the idea of preventing you from undertaking the great work, the moment you dismiss all such considerations firmly and decisively and say, 'What must I do?' and having discovered that, set to work to do it, allowing for no interruption, you will find that living peace which, as you seem to see, is a dynamic and not a static condition. There is quite a lot about this point in Little Essays Towards Truth, and also in the Vision of the Verse, Vision and the Voice," end quote. First off, let me say, as a magician, everything that you say is a magical incantation and has power. Think about like Liber Israfel. If I say, "Come up upon the mountains, the celestial water shall flow at my word. For I am Ra incarnate, Kephra created in the flesh," right? It's like we are the embodiment of God, the highest, the thing that created. We are an aspect of that. When you are a magician acting, like living life as a magician, everything that you say and do has magical repercussions. So when you say, "Peace, be still," when thoughts are running through your mind, you have to know then how to follow up and still your mind actively. And you can do that. It's not good to push down your emotions or not allow yourself to feel certain things. That's very damaging. However, you are in control of your thoughts, your actions, and your emotions to a great extent. While yes, you should feel them, you also should know how to control them and right-size them. Your emotions are inside of you. But it's only when you're inside of your emotions that it becomes really, really problematic. So you have to know how to step outside of a situation, observe it objectively, and then deal with it accordingly. We'll come back to that in a second. I also want to mention Little Essays Towards Truth is an awesome book, and I intend to do a playlist about it in the future, probably after this book, Magick Without Tears. Secondly, Crowley just said a lot in so few words, right? When we have a conflict, it's accompanied by emotions and thoughts. So it is our duty to sift through these, organize them, and find peace and stillness. Then determine what our will is, and then act. If you ever find yourself unsure what to do, my personal suggestion is that you act with the intention of bringing peace and betterment to your fellow. If your goal is those two things, peace in general and to better anybody involved, try your best to accomplish them, and really you cannot go wrong. The last thing I'll say, because we're going to talk a lot about magic, internal stuff, dealing with your emotions, all of those things. So the last thing I'll say is when situations happen that it's trying sometimes the universe will try you. You have to know how to be in command. If you're a magician, you are able to control the universe and affect magic upon whatever you need to affect it upon. You have to know when to use magic and when not to use magic. Sometimes you need to be still and let things happen because you have to look at a wider picture. Other times, you have to know when to influence things directly. You have to know what your given role is in any situation. You have to know what your will is in any situation. Ultimately, when you're dealing with a frenzy of thought brought on by conflict, you have to know how to still your mind, sort your thoughts out, sift through your emotions, then act accordingly. And again, sometimes acting is doing nothing. Sometimes acting is sidestepping. Sometimes acting is changing something. Sometimes acting is doing magic. And magic could be having a conversation with willed intent. Magic could also be going to therapy and getting results in therapy. Magic can be any multitude of things. It doesn't always have to be ritual. Magic is the act of causing change to occur in conformity with one's will. So you have to know how to implement magic. It's not always some grand ritual. Sometimes magic is in the very tiniest of details in your life and the smallest of actions taking place outside of a ritual context, So that's it for that for now. I'm going to continue with the letter. We're getting close. Quote, "Your postscript made me smile. It is not a very good advertisement for the kind of people with whom you have been associated in the past. My own position is a very simple one. I obeyed the injunction to buy a perfectly black hen without haggling. I have spent over 100,000 pounds of my inherited money on this work. And if I had 1,000 times that amount today, it would all go in the same direction. It is only when one is built in this way, to stand entirely aloof from all considerations of 2p halfpenny more or 4p halfpenny less, that one obtains perfect freedom on this plane of discs." End quote. Here, what Crowley is saying is that for him, in his view, if one is seriously dedicated to the great work as a student, they are willing to put everything they have towards the great work, everything that they are towards the great work. And Crowley himself did this, in my opinion. Granted, on a strictly money level, he blew a lot of money on drugs. But if it was his will to do drugs, whether it was to overcome those things internally, and the way to do that was to use them and cause himself to be broke at times, or whether his will was to use them to write those journals and books about addiction, and I don't like addiction, but physical dependency to substances, or whether his will was to use mind-altering substances for partly ritual. Whatever the case was that he was using them, even if his will was to mess himself up at times, and then come out of it later on in life, a changed person. Whatever that situation was, so be it. That was his work and his karma to deal with. The rest of his money, he did put a lot, almost anything. Even when he was broke, he put it towards magic, whether it was implements, publishing his books, buying stuff that he needed for rituals, traveling to specific places where he could learn about a new system of attainment, etc. Mountain climbing was his will at various times, and that could be considered doing his great work. What he's saying here is that freedom from the lower plane, when he says freedom on this plane of discs, by putting all of that you have into the great work, everything you have goes into it, that's how you attain freedom on the plane of discs. He's saying that freedom from the lower plane, that which corresponds with discs, the world of action, which is the Olam Asaya, the lowest part of the tree of life. To do that, one must be willing to part with all they have in exchange for nothing. A person doing their will is going to put their money and effort towards accomplishing their will and doing the great work. For example, think of any great scientist whose will it was to discover something in the laboratory. Prior to making a discovery that changed mankind's course and as a byproduct happened to make some of them rich and famous, how many of these great scientists were at one time penniless, yet willing to put all they had into the laboratory equipment? Had they not, they would never have made their discoveries. And without such people, for example, we wouldn't have penicillin and antibiotics that we do today. Maybe later on they would have been discovered, but it was an accident on the part of one scientist who was, as far as I'm aware, not very particularly rich, that happened to be studying science because he knew he needed to, left a petri dish out, realized that that type of fungus grew on that type of thing, and realized the medicinal values of that circumstance and discovered penicillin. Another example is Tesla. There was times where he remained broke, putting what little he had into proving the value of AC currents over DC currents, which is how all of our electricity is now running today. So lastly, on this subject, I want to remind listeners of a quote from Magic in Theory and Practice, which I hold personally very dear, and it's different from the above. Quote, "Another recommendation was this: buy whatever may be necessary without haggling. You must not try to strike a proportion between the values of incommensurable things. The least of the magical instruments is worth infinitely more than all that you possess, or if you like, than all that you stupidly suppose yourself to possess. Break this rule, and the usual nemesis of the half-hearted awaits you. Not only do you get inferior instruments, but you lose in some other way what you thought you were so clever to have saved. Remember Ananias. On the other hand, if you purchase without haggling, you will find that along with your purchase, the vendor has thrown in the purse of Fortunatus. No matter in what extremity you may seem to be, at the last moment, your difficulties will be solved." End quote. Besides this, on money also, there is a trick known to magicians. When you have hardly enough money left, yet find dire need for something, especially it has to be your will to have something that you don't have the money for, spend your last dollar absolutely carelessly towards your needs, despite your other needs, which you fear will go unmet. If you do this with absolute surety, no reservation, and absolute abandonment, it is an absolute guarantee that all of your needs will be met with extra left over. I myself have done this on more than one occasion, though I try to use it sparingly out of respect for the powers, as it not only works in truly desperate situations and must be used in matters of will alone, not want. If there are other means to attain something, magic should be used as a last resort for mundane purposes. Always resolve mundane means in mundane fashions. Also, if you're into bhakti yoga, if you really, truly, faithfully believe in Nuit, Hatit, and Rahor Kuit, if you put everything that you need in the hands of the mother, Nuit, she is going to take care of you. If your rituals be ever unto Nuit, she is not going to let you fall. As long as you firmly have that faith in this goddess, I personally believe, as long as my faith is in Nuit, she is never going to abandon me. My needs will be met by her, and thus far that has proven completely true. If I don't need something, she is not going to provide it, and that's what it is. I might not always get what I want, but my needs have been consistently met through Nuit. To continue with letter B, quote, "All the serious orders of the world, or nearly all, begin by insisting that the aspirant should take a vow of poverty. The Buddhist bhikkhu, for example, can own only 9 objects: his 3 robes, begging bowl, a fan, toothbrush, and so on. The Hindu and Mohammedan orders have similar regulations, and so do all the important orders of monkhood in Christianity. Our own order is the only exception of importance, and the reason for this is that it is much more difficult to retain one's purity if one is living in the world than if one simply cuts oneself off from it. It is far easier to achieve technical attainments if one is unhampered by any such considerations. These regulations operate as restrictions to one's usefulness in helping the world." End quote. This is something I truly love about the Lima, and people often ask, why don't we have any monasteries? Well, for one, there's no money being collected by a whole in an organized fashion to open monasteries. That's one reason. And I'll explain another reason. Though we can have abbeys and we do magical retreats at times so that we may redraw from the world for a little bit, or the abbey was there for temporary training for however long you needed it. The Lima is meant for us to function in the world and to deal with life and people who are not practicing. Hiding away from the world, while it does allow for one to dedicate all of their time to their attainment, while having their basic needs met, being in a monastery shelters one from life in pretty much all other ways. Know thyself. If you are afraid of the world and that's the reason you're trying to withdraw from it, that's a bad reason to want to withdraw. But if it's purely your will to withdraw, thou hast no right but to do your will. For the rest of us, unquote, Librel, behold, these be grave mysteries. For there are also of my friends who be hermits. Now think not to find them in the forest or on the mountain, but in beds of purple caressed by magnificent beasts of women, with large limbs and fire and light in their eyes, and masses of flaming hair about them. There shall ye find them. Ye shall see them at rule at victorious armies, at all the joy. And there shall be in them a joy 1,000,000 times greater than this. End quote. In addition, Crowley said the most important bit at the end of the above quote of letter B. So again, quote, "These regulations operate as restrictions to one's usefulness in helping the world. As I've said many times," end quote, "as I've said many times, after attainment comes service." So basically, fix yourself, do your work, and then give back. If you're living in a monastery, it's a lot harder to do that. Yes, you could train other people that come into the monastery, but you can't happen to stumble upon somebody who's never heard of the Lima and happen to give them the book of the law just at the right time. It's a lot harder to be a random conduit of the Lima if you're cloistered from the world. Here, letter B closes, quote, "There are terrible dangers, the worst dangers of all, associated with complete retirement. In my own personal judgment, moreover, I think that our own ideal of a natural life is much more wholesome. When you have found out a little about your past incarnations, you should be able to understand this very clearly and simply. Love is the law, love under will, fraternally 666, end quote. It comes down to working out karma, dealing with life on life's terms. It's easier for circumstances to be worked out if there are more variables on the playing field, so we're still talking about cloistering oneself at the end of this letter. Ultimately, the result internally, doing the work in a monastery or outside, is going to be the same. It doesn't matter where you're doing the great work, the internal result is going to be the same. However, the effects one can have externally are perhaps much greater on a social scale if the magician is working outside in the world as opposed to being cloistered from it. So we'll definitely explore karma as well as past lives in the future. For now, we're going to end here. So love is the law, love under will. See you on the next one. Peace.